As the young wife of a business tycoon, my daily routine was simple and monotonous to say, "Darling, you're amazing," every time my husband Julian outmaneuvered his rivals. It was a cliched script, but Julian loved it the most. He never grew tired of hearing it. One night pissed Julian off. The reason after the banquet, I was taken away in a car by Julian's sworn enemy Ethan Reed. It's not entirely accurate to say Ethan took me away. Actually, it was his girlfriend who stained my dress and offered to buy me a new one. I went along with them, fully intending to make them pay dearly for it. Julian was nowhere to be seen all night, yet his car suddenly appeared on the road, tailing us with eerie precision. During those 5 seconds, when he floored the accelerator, he was probably thinking Ethan was taking me somewhere to harvest my organs alive. No need, really no need. After all, I'm Ethan's sister-in-law. The legally recognized kind, that's right. Julian and Ethan are biological brothers. They share the same mother, but have different fathers. Back when Julian's parents' marriage fell apart, his mother remarried and gave birth to Ethan, while his father, as if granted amnesty, immersed himself in endless parties and never even came home. Ethan and Julian are like a controlled experiment in contrasts. The former grew up surrounded by love and sunshine, while the other was either abused by nannies or had his cheeks pinched bloody by his father's mistresses with their sharp nails. The moment Julian graduated from the Ivy League, he immediately sidelined his father at the board meeting. When his father died, he had the ashes scattered without delay, leaving all those illegitimate children who came knocking with DNA test results to claim inheritance utterly dumbfounded. The story didn't end there, because Ethan, who was born a few years later, happened to enter Wall Street and directly became Julian's hedge counterpart. Every time after meeting Ethan, Julian's face would never show the slightest trace of relaxation. This time was no exception. He coldly fished me out of Ethan's car, shoved me into his passenger seat, and started speeding the moment the seatbelt clicked, remaining completely silent throughout the ride. After arriving at the underground garage, Julian got out of the car first. He came around and pinned me against the car door. The moment I stepped out, the space between us was suffocatingly close, his crisp cologne enveloping me like an inescapable fog. If I lowered my gaze, I could see my own collarbone, but when I looked up, all I met were his dark, fathomless eyes, still brimming with restrained yet overwhelming intensity. "Why did you get into Ethan's car?" I poked Julian's chest with my finger. "Ethan's girlfriend was in there too, saw her." Julian immediately clamped his hand around my wrist and repeated, "Why did you get into Ethan's car?" Trembling, I stammered. "His girlfriend said she wanted to replace my dress, that's why I got in, but then it was Ethan who drove." Julian lowered his head to touch noses with me and coaxed, "How pretty could their compensation dress possibly be?" I nodded, lightly rubbing noses back and forth. "It's not pretty at all." Julian's anger dissipated as the corners of his lips lifted slightly. Suddenly it occurred to me, if not for this unexpected turn, Ethan's girlfriend Olivia should be the one being questioned right now. After all, that glass of wine was originally meant to be spilled on her. Everything happens for a reason too. I once had a dream in the not-too-distant future Julian would scheme Ethan into bankruptcy and trample him into the mud. But fortunes change with time. Eventually Julian would be outmaneuvered by Ethan, facing an even more humiliating downfall, utter ruin and disgrace. And in this entire story, I was nothing but a faceless, insignificant pawn. When Julian rejoiced, so did I. When Julian raged, so did I. Only later did I realize we were all characters in a book. The story's highs and lows, its pacing and intensity were far too predictable. There was a protagonist and antagonist, moments of despair, and no shortage of climactic scenes. And I was the antagonist's spouse, the kind who would inexplicably drench Ethan's girlfriend Olivia in red wine at a dinner party. Actions can trigger consequences. After Olivia got stained, she went upstairs to change clothes and unexpectedly met the male supporting character Liam. When Liam's advances were rejected, he conspired with Julian to scheme against Ethan. Ethan, caught between enemies, was driven into a desperate situation. "I don't want to spill this glass of wine anymore." But damn it all, no matter how tightly I gripped the wine glass, an invisible force pried at my wrist, forcing me to spill the red wine. What's going on? Why can't I change the course of the story? Finally, Olivia saw that I couldn't hold steady and grabbed my hand. The wine spilled all over me. Since things had already come to this, I had no choice but to speak up. "Hey, how can you be so rude? Don't you know him?" Not only did Olivia drape a shawl over me, but she also helped wipe off the wine stains. She's so gentle today. I got in her car, and not long after we started driving, another car appeared right on our tail, following closely. That's why when Julian came to pick me up, we ended up having that scene in the parking lot. "Let me see, you've been drinking." Julian pinched my lips into an O shape. "No," I slurred. "I poured it all out." "Damn Ethan and the others, it's all their fault." Julian chuckled softly, tilting his head to kiss me, just a light peck before laughing again. "I really haven't been drinking," he said. No sooner had he spoken than the sound of wheels rolling over pavement grew steadily clearer. I had just lifted my head when a beam of headlights hit me. Instinctively, I ducked back into Julian's embrace, pressing my ear against his chest to listen to his heartbeat. Julian was visibly irritated. The car came to a stop. Julian cast a cold glance over, and I followed his gaze, catching sight of Ethan's face through the light. Damn it, another conflict brewing. I tugged at Julian's sleeve, about to say "Don't fight," but that cursed mysterious force struck again. What came out of my mouth was "Honey, teach him a lesson." 3. Ethan, who had just leaned out of the car, froze momentarily. The instant Julian and I locked eyes, I clearly saw a faint, almost imperceptible smile flicker in his gaze. His voice was lazy and unhurried as he said, "Then get back in the car and listen to some music. These days, husbands who do exactly as I say are hard to come by." But did I forget something? I quickly grabbed Julian, who was about to walk toward Ethan, and hurriedly said, let us see what he has here for first. Ethan's expression had already returned to normal. Without looking at Julian, he extended his arm and said directly to me, sis, you left your earring in my car. Sure enough, Julian watched quietly as I went to retrieve the earring. Just as Ethan was about to stride off, Julian said coldly, don't go around calling her that outside. Ethan shrugged nonchalantly before leaving. His gaze lingered on me for several deliberate moments. I sensed he hadn't come just to deliver earrings, but was constrained by Julian's presence. Whatever, at least Julian didn't notice that little anomaly, otherwise he might suspect Ethan wanted to harvest my kidneys too. Honestly, I'm filled with regret. I should never have attended that damn banquet just to show off my new haute couture gown. After all, Julian was too difficult to comfort. I thought I had managed to cheer him up in the parking lot, but after my shower, I found him locked in his study sulking. When I quietly pushed the door open, I saw Julian sitting alone on the study sofa, the lights off, as if he wanted to disappear into the night, mysterious and melancholic. He must have been thinking about Ethan and the others. Without bothering to turn on the lights, I walked over, kicked off my shoes, and curled up beside him on the sofa. You're upset, huh? Julian murmured, his tone heavy. Just as I steeled myself to listen attentively to his troubles, something cold suddenly brushed against my earlobe. Itchy, what are you doing? Julian's gaze drifted to the tiny sparkling star pinched between his fingers. He pondered over and over, but couldn't he figure out how it had fallen out? So that's what he has hung up on. I gave him extra screen time for nothing. That girl complimented my earring, so I took it off to show her. My fingertips lightly brushed against his smooth suit jacket, momentarily distracted until Julian threaded the earring back through his earlobe and snapped me back to reality. I spoke again. Could you stop fighting with Ethan? Let us just live our own lives, or something terrible will happen. Still can't say it. The words are already stuck in my throat, yet they just won't come out. This is the third time my words and actions have been controlled. What do you want? Julian asked with a smile. Kate, do you want to buy something? Julian's head tilted slightly as he leaned halfway off the couch. The kaleidoscopic city lights played across his face as he said cheerfully, oh, by the way, I bought you a private island. All right, I instantly forgot what I wanted to say and wrapped my arms around Julian, sinking deeper into the sofa, entangled endlessly. For as if possessed, not a single word of admonishment could escape my lips. Yet when Ethan called to say he found the other earring, I agreed to his invitation. In the private club, when Ethan walked in, his long black coat stirred a slight chill. He then removed the coat, folded it over his arm, sat on the sofa, and crossed his legs. Ethan has matured a lot, unlike when I first saw him at the wedding, when he still carried a hint of youthful innocence. Ethan, I propped my head up with my hand and pointed to my left ear. Actually, I only wore one earring that day. Ethan smiled and said, I know, both that time in the parking lot and this time you deliberately sought me out to talk. Ethan leaned forward slightly and said calmly, sister-in-law Olivia lost a project last week. I looked into it. I gently interrupted, it was me, but I originally meant to mess with you, ended up hurting the wrong person. I tried hard to recall the details, but the sequence had grown hazy. Even my own thought process was now a blur. Ethan froze, his expression one of surprise, whether at the mistaken harm or at my blunt honesty. I couldn't tell. At this point, it didn't matter whether I dissembled or confessed. Everything Ethan had already seen through my tactics. Any further lies would just make me look like a clown. Ethan wouldn't fall for such petty tricks, so why should I bother setting up those half-hearted traps like before? Ethan hesitated, seemingly surprised by how straightforward this was. Still uneasy, he continued, sister-in-law Olivia doesn't know much about business matters. Yet, so could you. He paused, let her off. So Ethan bowing his head for love. I stood up to leave. I told you it was accidental. Why won't you believe me? Oh, and you'd better watch yourself too. Stop charging around so recklessly. You're no match for Julian right now. Thanks. I turned back to glare at him viciously. Not that I actually care. Ethan nodded helplessly. The club's corridor was long and quiet, stretching endlessly into the darkness. As I turned the corner past the restroom, bursts of laughter drifted out, mingled with a name that caught my attention. Hey, that Julian still does things without leaving any room for mercy. Someone ought to teach him a lesson sooner or later. Another malicious chuckle followed. Kids from families like his all have some psychological issues, don't they? With a dark expression, I pressed the phone to my ear and spoke loudly. Alice, where's my husband Julian? Why isn't he here when I've arrived? An indescribable silence instantly fell around me, broken only by my two faint sounds in response. He's here too, just upstairs. Ethan's voice suddenly rang out behind me, shattering the dead silence. Quite the player, I muttered under my breath. Though I knew he was most likely at a business gathering, I still marched upstairs in my high heels. Even though Julian was the one being gossiped about, it felt as if I were the one who had suffered some grave injustice. I saw Julian playing pool through the glass. The sleeves of his ink-black shirt were rolled up, revealing an exquisite silver wristwatch, his slender straight fingers pressed skillfully against the cue as he held a cigarette between his lips. As he leaned down intently to take the shot, a uniformed waitress stood quietly nearby holding a tray of drinks. When the ball sank into the pocket and the crowd cheered nice shot, the waitress smoothly stepped forward with the drinks. Julian raised a hand to block, naturally keeping everyone at arm's length. Really, one to you have a drink, Mr. Julian? A soft hand tentatively rested on his shoulder. Julian paused briefly before turning his head with a smile. He plucked the cigarette from his lips, stubbed it out in the ashtray, then took the glass and drained it in one go. His voice was deep and mellow. Will this do? I nodded that's about right. Julian smiled as he introduced me to the other CEOs, my wife. Nice to see you again, Mrs. Julian. You're as beautiful as ever. Julian's smile deepened slightly. After exchanging the usual pleasantries, I leaned in and whispered in his ear, actually, I'm here for a surprise inspection. Find anything? Julian asked softly. You've got a woman's perfume on you. Julian narrowed his eyes slightly while lining up his shot. It's the third bottle from the right on the second row of your dressing table, he said casually. You took the wrong one, that's mine, I know. Click. Another stunning spin shot. My god, this ISN tea just pool, it's art. 5. I could watch Julian's carefree demeanor for hours. I nearly missed the message from our housekeeper. Your mother's here, I told Julian. He casually set down his cue and said, good, we'll get some soup. The rich aroma of creamy chicken soup greeted me as soon as I entered the door. Come here, Julian's mother called with a warm smile. During the meal, Julian's mother did most of the gentle talking while Julian spoke little, mostly drinking his soup quietly, occasionally nodding to show he was listening. Your younger brother hasn't even coming home lately. Seems he is staying at the hotel near his company. Looks like things are quite troublesome. Take it easy, and don't you dare play for real. I know, Julian said in an exceptionally gentle tone. I wasn't he really playing? Didn't he get a chance to play? Alright then, we agreed. You can toughen him up, but don't go overboard. Julian nodded calmly, and then this about that I was going to say something about Julian too. I began, whenever something doesn't he go his way, he doesn't he come home. Julian's mother chuckled, and go out and have some fun. Your Uncle Scott's racetrack has been renovated. Julian, go give it a try. Julian was very cooperative. Alright, he said. Not long after dinner, Julian's mother got up to leave, and Julian went to see her off. When Julian returned, I asked, you had 2 bowls of soup tonight. Should I learn to make it too? No, if you drink too much at one, tea tastes as good, Julian said, lazily tousling my hair until it was a mess. But the soup earlier was still delicious, though for some reason after drinking it, I feel even more like messing with Ethan. I blew away a few strands of hair that had fallen over my face. You're asking questions you already know the answer to. Julian watched my movements with a low chuckle, then raised his hand to run through his hair, smoothing it back slowly. I tilted my head up, studying him while recalling that dream. Even after 3 years with Julian, I only grasped the surface of business matters, but one thing became increasingly clear. Julian was surrounded by wolves like what I'd overheard outside the restroom. Hostility clung to him. Because of that dream, I'd tried repeatedly to caution Julian about showing mercy, yet some force always stopped the words in my throat. Was it truly wrong to speak? Yet reason told me no. My reason had already been spent lingering outside that restroom, resisting the urge to storm in and hurl shoes at them had been the height of my rationality. What other reason could I possibly have left when it comes to Julian? So why bother asking him such a simple question? What if you lose the bet? Just like my father, Julian said casually, I'd fall from the highest point, land in utter disgrace, and end up with nowhere to go. I froze for a moment as that vivid, haunting dream flooded back with all its details. Julian summarized his own affairs quite accurately. As for why no trace of me could be found, it's because he had prepared an escape route for me before the collapse. From beginning to end, I remained within his safe harbor. What if I made you stop gambling? After saying these words, my heart pounded wildly. Oh heavens, I finally said it. Turns out you really have to wait for the right moment to say these things. As for when the right moment is, who knows? Julian fell silent for a moment before saying, you've always been the one supporting me. I shook my head gently. Can't you support me just this once? Julian didn't he respond. His hair was finally smoothed down bit by bit. I wrapped my arms around his waist and back, refusing to let him go while my restless hands began to wander. I said with dissatisfaction, how come I can't find a single credit card? Lost it all playing ball? Huh, yo, someone actually made you lose money. Who is it? Julian replied with a half smile. Ethan. I stopped what I was doing. What happened? Julian chuckled lightly. Before you came, he was with me playing ball, then I lost all my money. You guys can still hang out together. Director Green set this whole thing up. Losing so much in one game, where into going racing. Let us play another big round then. Don't mess with Ethan on the track. I withdrew my smile and said sternly. Julian gave a lazy humph, clearly in a bad mood now. Curious? Julian asked, curious about what kind of sweet talk he poured into you when he met you at the club. How do you know? Everything. Julian began playing with the ends of my hair again, as if trying to distract himself. Are you talking about Ethan asking to meet you, or about him pouring sweet talk into you? I'll take the bait then. So you also think Ethan is quite the charmer? Huh, no wonder I find him rather cute now. As soon as the words left my mouth, I frowned at myself. Julian burst out laughing. Of course, it's against my will. How could I possibly like someone Julian dislikes? If it weren't for hypnotizing Julian to make him stop targeting Ethan, I wouldn't be speaking against my conscience. Enough talk time to pick out racing gear. The vast spectator stands were quite sparsely populated. Olivia and I sat together while the girlfriends, ambiguous relationships, or sisters brought by the other rich second-generation heirs all gathered on the opposite side, keeping their distance from us. They all seemed too afraid to approach me. The reputation of being domineering precedes me. Why don't you go play with them? I tilted my chin upward. Olivia smiled bitterly. They do make things difficult for me. How I can do that too. Oh, last time I didn't pour that wine on her. Because you're dating Ethan, I asked. Yeah, Olivia replied. Ethan, he is quite popular. Stay patient, sooner or later all obstacles will disappear. It sounds like a platitude, but it's the truth. The ending isn't too far off now. When it comes, don't all protagonists get their happy ending? How ironic. Here I am from the villain's camp teaching the protagonist how to patiently wait for tomorrow's sun. Olivia already regarded me as Ethan's good sister-in-law and whispered to me for quite a while, but I could barely hear her. My eardrums were filled with the violent screech of tires fiercely grinding against the track. I stared unblinkingly at Julian's red Formula car several times. My mind nearly went blank. The scene was so thrilling that I momentarily wondered whether the uncontrollable centrifugal force would suddenly fling someone out and crush them beneath the wheels. My eyelids twitched incessantly. Amid the high-speed chase, sparks continuously erupted from the track. My eyes were fixed solely on that one car, so when Olivia nervously gripped my hand and asked who was driving the blue car next to the red one, I froze for a long moment. The moment I remembered Ethan was inside, a deafening crash abruptly cut off the words already on my lips. The red and blue cars collided violently, leaving a scene of utter chaos. Julian's hand was injured. Ethan's injuries were more severe. His leg was wounded. As Julian and I sat on hospital chairs, his mother rushed in, cupping his face while examining him anxiously. "How are you? Does your head hurt?" she asked with concern. "Mom, the wound is right here," Julian drawled. I see it, Kate." She turned to me. "I'll go check on our youngest. You take care of him." I nodded repeatedly. Julian's mother patted his shoulder again. "It's alright, don't blame yourself. Accidents happen when playing." As she turned to leave, Julian reached out as if to grab something, but his hand couldn't lift high. After a moment it dropped back down, and he said to me casually, "Let us go home." The entire way back, I stubbornly refused to say a word. Clearly angry, Julian kept glancing down to read my expression. I finally snapped and cursed. What terrible driving! Julian seemed genuinely startled by my outburst, freezing for a long moment. This was probably the first time I'd ever been so harsh with him. The old me would most likely never have lost my temper at him like this. "You were worried sick, weren't you?" Julian bent down to meet my eyes at eye level, his apology thick in the air. "Kate, I'm sorry, I was wrong." "What went wrong?" "Going too fast around the bend." "Yeah, that's about right, Kate." But then Julian suddenly raised his uninjured hand, pressing his fingertip against my lips with just the right pressure. Like a mischievous child, he slowly smeared my lipstick, turning my face into a mess. Yet instead of apologizing, he burst out laughing at the sight. Julian's a bit odd, but even though I knew the speed was wrong, I didn't adjust. I just let it keep going until we finally collided with Ethan's car. I've always known Julian has a touch of madness in him. I never thought there was a problem before, but this time I'm angry. I'm really angry. When I first entered the venue and saw Ethan's car with all its tires intact, I thought Julian had listened to me. Little did I know he had cooked up something even bigger. My face darkened. "Didn't I tell you not to mess with Ethan on the track?" Julian said softly. There was no premeditation, but in that moment, it was indeed intentional. Tears streamed down my face. "You wouldn't even listen to me anymore." Julian froze, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "You're starting to think I'm wicked now." "No, my head's a mess too. If we follow the original plot, Julian will suffer. Forcing it back on track hurt. Julian again being the villains is so damn hard for us." I kicked off my shoes and ran upstairs with my tear-streaked face, only to be caught by Julian, who started pleading. "Kate, I was really wrong." He was only using one arm, so I could easily break free, but after just 2 steps I suddenly remembered that bowl of chicken soup from a few days ago, sweet at first but bitter in the aftertaste, and turned back to hug Julian again. "Ugh, I'm so spineless. Can I stay angry a little longer?" "Honestly, I'm hopeless." Feeling a bit cold, I climbed off Julian's chest and fumbled for the remote before bed. I'd lower the AC temperature because I was worried about his wounds, but now I'm the one who can't handle it. Putting down the remote and casually grabbing my phone at 2 a.m. I draped a shawl over my shoulders, tiptoed to the study, turned on the small desk lamp, and quietly scrolled through my phone. Just as I was contemplating whether to check Julian's phone for signs of other women, my phone suddenly vibrated. The slightest sound in the silent night was enough to startle me. I barely caught the phone before it hit the floor, answering the call without even checking the caller ID. "Hey sis-in-law." The person on the other end seemed shocked that I actually answered, their breathing coming in uneven gasps. The term sis-in-law made me instinctively think it was Ethan, but listening carefully, I realized it was a woman's voice. "Olivia, it's me sis-in-law." Faint sobbing sounds came through the line. I sighed helplessly. "Could you stop crying first? Hearing this late at night is seriously creeping me out." After the crying stopped over there, the story gradually came out bit by bit. Olivia had been set up, left alone in the middle of nowhere late at night, left to die. Ethan's phone was unreachable, her friends' phones were all switched off, and with her battery nearly dead, in desperation, she called me. Final go. After all, she just lost a project last week, and it was my doing. By the time I picked up Olivia, it was already 3 a.m. While Olivia curled up vulnerably in the backseat, I still managed to fish for information. "Do you know someone named Liam?" "No, but I think I've seen that name in Ethan's contacts list. They have some business dealings." "Why?" I casually lied then. "It wasn't you I saw with him." "Never mind. I thought you two knew each other." I planned to just drop Olivia off at her building and leave immediately until I spotted a wheelchair. Ethan sat in the wheelchair still in a cast. When Olivia got out of the car and ran toward him, he let out a sigh of relief, his face still pale with lingering fear. "I was about to call the police," he said. Olivia pointed in my direction. "My sister-in-law brought me back." Ethan looked over from a distance and gave a gentle nod. "Thank you, sister-in-law." "That's not very sincere, Ethan. Didn't you win 2 of Julian's black cards?" Ethan burst out laughing. "Next time when my sister-in-law and big brother celebrate their 3rd anniversary, I'll double the gift amount." "What a perfect trap," Ethan called out to me before I got in the car, asking how do you plan to celebrate the 3rd anniversary. "We're trying to fish for Julian's schedule." Ethan sighed, deeply tapping his injured leg. "Yes, I want to know his plans, so I can gauge whether I can rest peacefully." I glanced at him, closed the car door, and said, "You just focus on resting." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. When I tiptoed back to bed, Julian still hadn't woken up. But when daylight came, Julian couldn't wait to drag me out of bed. "Confess," I exclaimed in surprise. "So you knew all along?" Julian absent-mindedly adjusted the slipping strap of my dress. Such a trivial matter, isn't worth hiding from Julian." Julian reacted the same way, calling it a trivial matter. "True, but we could squeeze some thank you gifts out of Ethan." "You said his phone was initially unreachable, not switched off." Olivia said that probably went to deal with some matters. Only later, when I checked my phone, did I notice all those missed calls. Julian sneered, "Working at the hospital past midnight, how diligent." "What's wrong with you?" I poked his chest. "Boss, you're late." Julian pressed his forehead against my shoulder, his voice lazy. "Don't want to go to work." But you're the boss, Julian. Can't sign documents, don't want to go to the office. But you hurt your left hand, didn't you? Julian thought for a moment, straying further down the wrong path. Last time I said, I bought you a private island, want to go see it. I surrendered instantly. Let us go, what's so great about work anyway? 8. The helicopter's rotor blades made deafening noises, driving me straight into Julian's arms. Julian adjusted his posture so he could both cover my ears and let my gaze fall upon the vast scenery outside the window. Julian was unusually quiet. Even his deep eyes that usually held entire landscapes now seemed somewhat hollow. I withdrew my gaze from him and did some quick calculations. Our 3rd anniversary would perfectly coincide with our stay on this island. As for playing hooky from work, I suspect Julian had been planning this for quite some time. The island villa was spotless with sunlit windows. If not for Julian's injured hand requiring this vacation, we rarely have such leisurely breakfasts together. There was a strange long-lost sensation. I stumbled downstairs half asleep, and every time I saw Julian sitting quietly on the sofa, I would snap awake instantly. Then I'd rest my hand on the stair railing and watch him. If sunlight happened to stream in that day, I'd gaze a little longer. I found myself increasingly looking forward to the morning alarm, but that day before the alarm could sound, a faint voice reached my ears. At first, I thought I was dreaming, then gradually realized Julian was speaking to me. I just wasn't fully awake, listening in a drowsy haze. He seemed to say there was urgent business requiring his return. He added that he wouldn't take me back yet, that I should stay and enjoy myself a while longer. He said. I bolted upright, my heart pounding. When I fully came to my senses, I realized no one had been speaking to me at all. But after I ran downstairs, I discovered Julian was truly gone. The butler came over and said a lot to me, but his words were vague. I went back to my room to get my phone, only to find it had been taken too. My limbs went cold as I grabbed the bodyguard. I'm going back. Still maintaining his professional demeanor. Sir will come to pick you up. First I snatched up a handful of jewelry, then reconsidered and put it down. Next I grabbed an eyeshadow palette, but remembered how hard this color scheme was to find. In the end, I just hurled a pillow at the wall. Julian, go die. The butler timidly reminded me, Madam, the surveillance is still on at LLB transmitted. If the surveillance were off, who would I even be cursing at? I'd curse him, just curse him. Sigh, still pissed. Now I get why Julian took my phone, otherwise I'd have called a dozen male models to come play with me in minutes. But reality is there are no male models. All I can do is tease the cat, water the plants, play games, and watch downloaded movies. Comfortable, sure, but boring as hell. Is Julian starting to move against Ethan now? Just thinking about it makes me grind my teeth to dust. So Julian didn't listen to a single damn punctuation mark of what I said. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I wouldn't bother with him anymore, but my presence doesn't affect him anyway. But going back is another matter. Whatever Julian paid them, I'll triple it, and then they all have to listen to me. I tried to bribe them. They still shook their heads with smiles. I buried myself back in playing video games. When I got tired of playing, I wandered around the island, then meticulously recreated my little island from Animal Crossing. Just as construction was nearing completion, the long-dormant online chat function suddenly pinged with a notification. I curled my lips into a smirk. Julian's plan had flaws. It was Olivia reaching out. My fingers flew across the keyboard, pouring out a torrent of words, only to freeze when I saw her message. First, with stiff fingers, I hit delete. After the racing incident, Olivia got engaged to Ethan, so I started calling her sister-in-law, but this time the address had reverted to something more distant. Sister Kate, did you know Mr. Julian is currently under investigation for suspected economic crimes? My head was in a daze for a while, then my hands went numb so badly that I had to put down what I was holding. I rubbed them vigorously until they turned red, but the numbness still came in waves. When Olivia mentioned the accuser, I saw that name, Liam. No, this shouldn't be happening. In the original plot, after I splashed wine on Olivia, she would coincidentally meet Liam, who was scripted to turn dark for love. Liam was supposed to eventually join forces with Julian, but now nothing happened at the banquet. I didn't throw that glass of wine. Olivia never met Liam, and Liam naturally wouldn't fall for her, without reason, since the premise for his dark turn doesn't exist. Julian and Liam wouldn't cross paths either. Even if they did, Liam would have no reason to point his gun at Julian. I can't figure it out. According to the original trajectory of the story, Ethan would be the first to suffer, while Julian would remain unscathed. But in the blink of an eye, the story hit fast forward. The plotline about Ethan's bankruptcy was abruptly skipped, and Julian marched unceremoniously toward his predetermined ending. That dinner party that wrongly spilled glass of wine from the very beginning, I altered the course of the story. I was the one who hastened Julian's descent into ruin. Footsteps approached from behind, and the buzzing in my head abruptly ceased, leaving the world eerily quiet. I turned around slowly and saw a gentle face. Sister-in-law, Ethan said with a cheerful smile, am I too late? I promised to give you a gift for your 3rd anniversary. I stared at Ethan. Though he was smiling, his eyes were hollow and empty. Ethan didn't avoid my gaze, and when our eyes met, I caught a whiff of something amiss. A sudden chill ran through me. True to his word, Ethan had kept his promise. He really had come bearing gifts. Those limited edition handbags and jewelry were valuable enough to cover the black cards Julian had lost. Not only that, but the private jet I boarded for my return trip was entirely thanks to him. Ethan sat beside me in his immaculate suit, and I couldn't help but study him. His leg had healed, recovered remarkably fast. He smiled. Actually, I could dodged your brother's car that day, but I chose not to. After getting injured, hiding in the hospital, Ethan continued, would make your brother lower his guard. It was you, but not entirely. I teamed up with that Liam guy. He took the front stage while I worked from the shadows. Why should he listen to you, Ethan? Of course, it's because the benefits are substantial enough and the plan is meticulously crafted. He can't resist taking the gamble. Not only meticulous, but also ruthless. Ethan leisurely took a sip of wine, seemingly lost in either reminiscence or contemplation, but in any case he fell into an inexplicably long silence. Sister-in-law, Ethan said, locking eyes with me. I had a dream in it. At this very moment I would be beaten to a pulp by my elder brother, though I'd eventually turn the tables. The process was excruciating. I won T let it happen again, so given the chance I'll crush him first, then take down Liam. The usually gentle and refined Ethan suddenly bared his fangs, catching everyone off guard. At this moment Ethan seemed more like a villain than the actual villain. I slowly turned my face away, gradually digesting the fact that Ethan also held the script. Sister-in-law, you're not surprised at all, are you? Ethan said calmly, because you're just like me. I suddenly turned my head to look at him. Ethan smiled and asked, at that banquet, how did the person who got their dress stain change from Olivia to you? He knew Ethan had noticed something was off with the plot's direction since that banquet night, and thus his gaze fell upon me, the one who caused the unexpected deviation. The time we met at the club, you were testing me. Yes, you were completely, like a different person than us, when I confirmed my suspicions. I looked at Ethan's slender hands. The ring that had once adorned his middle finger was now gone. I couldn't help but sneer. In your dream you saw Liam almost hurt Olivia, didn't you? She was nearly, and yet you still had the nerve to team up with him. If she knew you'd forgive and forget so easily. I've resorted to desperate measures. Ethan interrupted me, a self-mocking expression crossing his face. ISNT this, my just deserts. I froze for a moment before asking, so, Olivia really knew? Ethan replied, Olivia didn't know. How could she possibly know what was happening behind the scenes? She just thought I was ruthless and cruel. She's afraid of me, so afraid. She doesn't even dare to get close to me anymore. He paused, then continued, that's why I came to pick you up. I promised her I wouldn't drag you into this, but she's still terrified of me. Olivia fell in love with Ethan because at first he was like the bright moon in the sky. But the current Olivia had never witnessed the original course of events, so to her eyes Ethan now seemed to have undergone a drastic change in temperament. Ethan rubbed his bare ring finger and asked heavily, Julian is ruthless, cunning, and shameless. What else there to like about him? This question was clearly directed at me. I shrugged. I don't like his ruthlessness, cunning, or shamelessness either, but he has been like this from the start. What can I do? Good news, Julian has never changed. Bad news, he has always been a villain. Ethan's shoulders shook with laughter. Are you okay? I asked stiffly. Ethan stopped laughing and said woodenly, I'm fine, I can sleep soundly from now on. It's you. I'm surprised you managed to resist scratching my face with your nails. Gritting my teeth, I said, times have changed, times have changed. Ethan wanted to alter the plot, and in doing so, he lost the one he loved. I too wanted to change things, yet ended up personally sending Julian to his doom. Thinking myself clever, I disembarked from the plane only to step into a waiting car. That interminable journey provided ample time, yet I couldn't devise any way to save Julian. In my dreams I felt this same despair. It was only at this moment that I truly understood the intensity of Ethan's resolution when he swore never to repeat past mistakes. Trying again is unbearable. I don't blame Julian for cutting off my connection to the outside world anymore. Living in constant fear is far more terrifying than mere boredom. I turned my head toward the car window, gazing blankly at the passing street scenes. Until two police cars came screaming past, my eyes suddenly snapped into focus. Slowly I clenched my fists, crumpling handfuls of my skirt. Don't be nervous, Ethan said calmly. Where are you taking me? Ethan, your home, of course. Where else is Julian there? How could he be there? The investigation ended that quickly. Ethan leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes to rest. After a long pause, he finally said, it's over. I suppose I haven't bothered following up these past few days. Haven't had the mind for it. After I got out of the car, Ethan didn't follow me down. He remained motionless in the back seat, only saying, I want to see you off. I walked slowly for a few steps when suddenly I heard the abrupt sound of a door closing behind me, followed by hurried footsteps. Ethan strode past me directly toward the villa's entrance. As the door was pushed open, the person sitting on the sofa turned their head in response. The impeccably tailored suit and flawlessly knotted tie exuded an air of distinguished elegance. Far from the disheveled state I'd imagined, Kate Julian's gaze landed on me first before shifting to Ethan, remarking, when my bodyguard said you went to fetch her, I could hardly believe it, but here we are. Ethan nodded stiffly. Yes, I went to pick up sister-in-law. Kate, I didn't mean to abandon you, Julian explained. I just ran into some trouble and had to rush back to handle it. Quite a sticky situation, but it's resolved now. Some Liam fellow set a trap waiting for me to fall into it, so I had him put away instead. Julian was speaking to me, yet every word seemed deliberately meant for Ethan's ears. Ethan took a deep breath and spoke with remarkable calmness. Big brother, you've won again. Again, Julian wore a puzzled expression. Ethan paused, pulling out a lighter to light a cigarette. After all, it's not just that Liam guy who has fallen into your hands. You don't even smoke, don't just burn it for nothing. Julian deftly took the cigarette and placed it between his own lips. He looked at me and said, Kate, just this one. I snorted coldly. Ethan stayed for a meal. He behaved naturally, showing almost no unusual emotions. As for Julian, he barely took 2 puffs before stubbing out his cigarette, then turned to ask me why I wasn't wearing any necklace today. I had intended to wear the one Ethan gave me, but nothing matched it, so I ended up wearing nothing. Ethan looked up and said, next time send it with the clothes. Julian smiled. Neither exposed the other, even though their hearts were already turbulent when their eyes met. By chance their expressions remained as calm as still water. Was it a truce? Not necessarily. We'll have to see what happens next. After finishing that meal, Julian disappeared without a trace. I went upstairs and finally spotted his figure through the massive floor-to-ceiling window. Julian had taken off his suit jacket, leaving only a relaxed yet well-fitted shirt. He sat on the terrace, the wind tousling his hair, faintly exuding an air of decadence. Kate, you want me to die? I leaned over to look down. This is the second floor, only 10 feet from the ground. Stop pretending. Julian said the guilty party files the first complaint. That's how it goes. Then I'll push you. I reached out, as if to push my hand already resting on Julian's shoulder, yet he didn't even show an instinctive reaction. Truly defenseless, but if I push you down, who LL answer my questions, I asked seriously. Since when did you start noticing something was off? Didn't you remind me? Julian curled his lips. That time you said Ethan's phone was unreachable. I thought his recent busyness was abnormal. I took some time to check all his ongoing projects, and frankly the workload wasn't enough to justify him burning the midnight oil so diligently, so I kept an extra eye on him. Just that. Anything else? Julian tilted his head back, letting the wind brush past him, then turned to look at me. Didn't my mom mention it? She said my brother had been so busy lately, he wasn't coming home, and told me not to take his training too far even if I wanted to toughen him up. But you should remember, I was preoccupied with my own affairs back then, and had no time to mess with him, and later didn't you tell me to stop gambling? So I couldn't be bothered to hassle him anymore. Really? I blinked my eyes. Julian mimicked my tone, repeating my words. Can't you just support me for once? I suddenly remembered, and giggled. Well, if there's a first time, there'll be a second. Julian said lazily. Sure, whatever, beat up whoever you want by whatever you want. I asked excitedly. Since you listened to me, does that mean I wasn't just being presumptuous? You were actually reflecting on yourself just now. Julian looked surprised. Maybe we should just blame Ethan instead. Fine. 5 seconds after quickly joining Julian's side, I suddenly realized we'd gone off track again. Weren't we supposed to leave him alone? I almost got caught in his trap this time. Blame him? Quietly, I chuckled, stopping myself. Just as I started scheming again, I changed the subject. I thought you two were going to have a big showdown. Didn't you expect it to end with just a meal? My little brother is quite impressive, Julian said, his tone unusually free of sarcasm, speaking calmly. Fighting him, worth it. What just happened was much more interesting. Still, that villain, a novel angle just occurred to me. Do you think my mother-in-law might? Julian smiled faintly. I took it as her reminding me too. It suddenly struck me. Would you like to have a talk with my mother-in-law? Julian shook his head. That mother-son pair probably still has much to discuss. I poked him. Really? No, don't. I kept poking him. Then should I accompany you? Haven't you always been the one accompanying me? Only 3 years. You make it sound like a lifetime, but 3 years, and then another 3 years. That just forever. Extra. Julian didn't like Catherine Joe, the arranged marriage partner his grandfather had chosen for him. It actually had little to do with who the candidate was. Even if it had been Elizabeth Joe or Anna Joe wouldn't have wanted to marry them either. The key was that Julian had never even considered marriage. Their few brief meetings with Catherine, of course, hadn't led to anything unexpected. He felt no affection for her, and she felt none for him either. They discussed canceling the engagement with their families at a bar. The bar's eerie lighting made Catherine appear even more coldly beautiful, giving off an air of keeping everyone at arm's length. Julian ordered a drink, but couldn't be bothered to drink it. The ice cubes half melted. Then let us go back and tell them today no more delays, Julian said coldly. Catherine nodded absently. You remember to say it's my fault. That's more like it, Catherine murmured. Just as Julian was about to ask, is there anything else, Catherine stood up gracefully, tossed out a casual I'm leaving, and walked away with elegant poise. But her lipstick fell a soft plop just as the music drowned out the sound. Julian watched the small black cylinder roll slowly to his feet. He bent down, picked it up side, and rose to follow her. Catherine didn't leave immediately. Instead, she headed toward the restroom. Julian leaned against the wall, waiting. The restroom was nearly empty and quiet, with only intermittent sounds of running water coming from inside. Before long, the sound of water stopped, and Catherine's voice came through the wall. She seemed to be talking to someone on the phone. What, you also think we didn't give ourselves away? That's good. You scared me to death. So annoying. Why doesn't he like me at all? Now I have to pretend to dislike him too. You want me to make the first move? No way. Absolutely no way. Being clingy is just too humiliating. Hey, where's my lipstick? Where did my big tube of lipstick go? Julian lowered her head gently, twisting the lipstick between her fingers. Catherine froze in place the moment she stepped out of the bathroom, her face instantly flushing crimson. Julian suddenly remembered that she should have avoided it in advance. Next time, be careful with your lipstick. Julian handed it over nonchalantly. Catherine couldn't care less about the lost lipstick now. After all she'd already lost, face preserving what little dignity remained suddenly seemed far more important. I wish I could vanish on the spot, yet I have no choice but to walk this endless corridor under the weight of that gaze burning into my back. Julian hadn't forgotten his purpose for coming, clutching the lipstick in his palm. He followed at a leisurely pace. Catherine seemed to dart through any available exit, slipping out through the side door. It's quite remote. They're not easy to hail a cab. Might have to drive her back. Catherine, he called out. She didn't stop. The door slammed shut with a bang, leaving Julian on the other side. Through a door one could still clearly see Catherine alone, being pestered by several men. They kept waving their phones at her, apparently asking for her contact information. Julian pushed the door open and heard Catherine snap irritably, "Get lost. I'm married. Stop bothering me." Kate. Julian's voice was slightly hoarse, as if suppressing anger. Catherine turned her head swiftly, breaking free with practiced ease. She deftly looped her arm through Julian's and glared straight ahead. "Darling, teach them a lesson." The end.